Part 7. Studio City, 12856 Hatteras Street, 12:02 p.m. Mike and Linda were standing on the curb, arguing over the toy truck. He held the opinion that it belonged to him. She held the truck. She was 9 and 2 years older than him. It was a plastic model with realistic details of a dump truck, and he had been using it to excavate Mrs. Connor's flower garden. Linda had come up behind him and snatched the truck up. "Mum said you shouldn't play here anymore." Mike clutched at the truck. "You're not Mum, buttface." "She said I was in charge while she went to the store," Linda answered haughtily. But Mike lunged and knocked the toy out of her arms. When it struck the dirt, he dived for it. The truck bounced into the street and rolled to a stop. "Real smart move, Mikey." Mike shrugged and started to go get it. A car was coming down the street. The driver was methodically scanning houses for the addresses. Linda saw it coming and ran after Mike. She yanked him back. "Wait for the car, stupid!" Mike squirmed impatiently as the station wagon approached. Come on, he commanded the driver. Mike and Linda stood at the curb and watched the car slow suddenly, swerve in their direction, then skid to a stop, crumpling the toy truck into a plastic pancake. The children froze, Linda stepping back with apprehension, Mike blinking back surprise and swelling outrage. Mike and Linda looked up at the giant man as he unfolded himself from the car and stomped up to them. He was someone from a beanstalk, Mike was thinking. Linda was just scared, holding Mike around the neck. The man just walked past as if he couldn't see them. "Hey!" Mike called out before Linda could clamp her hand over his mouth. The Terminator ignored the children and walked up to the Connor house. He rapped on the door. A little Pomeranian yapped ineffectually at his heels. It meant nothing to him. He was waiting for Sarah Connor. She came to the door and opened it to the length of the chain lock. "Yes?" she asked cautiously, staring through the crack at this huge, bizarre-looking man. "Sarah Connor?" Terminator asked blandly. "Yes?" He punched the door. It snapped the chain and swung inward, throwing the woman off balance. She screamed and fell back. In an instant, the Terminator pulled out the .45 and activated the laser sight. It streaked across the room and locked on her forehead as the Terminator aimed. She was blinded for a second by the red glare, then her vision was shattered as a bullet exploded from the gun and struck her 2 centimeters above the right eyebrow. She collapsed on the carpet, and the Terminator brought the beam down and centered it on her chest. He fired the weapon until it was empty. The staccato blasts echoed over the high-pitched yaps of the Pomeranian on the porch. The Terminator leaned down and, using an X-Acto knife, made an incision from the ankle to the knee. Mike had run forward after the man before he went into the house, and now he was standing on the sidewalk, looking through the open door at the violence inside. He had no scale for this. He loved cartoons, especially Tom and Jerry. He laughed when Tom would topple something on Jerry and the cat would flatten, like his truck, and then bounce back to normal. Mrs. Connor wasn't bouncing back. Instead, she was reddening the carpet beneath her. He had never seen anyone lay so still. Linda came up just as the man inside started to cut Mrs. Connor open, as calmly as carving a roast. Linda grabbed Mike's hand and pulled him next door to their house. She slammed the door behind her and locked it. The Terminator stood up over the body of the dead woman. He had not found what he was looking for. Target identification, negative. He considered his options for a moment, then pocketed the weapon and strode to the door. They watched from the window as the man walked back to his car and got in. As he drove away, Linda was crying. All Mike could think about was how flat his toy truck looked out there on the asphalt. He murmured quietly, "He wrecked it." The whole thing had taken maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Already it was becoming unreal. There was no drama in it, only death. Abrupt and without apparent meaning. But there was a very deep meaning to these events, a meaning very few would ever decipher, and certainly a meaning far too sad and profound for the children pressed to the window to comprehend. In the next few years, Mike and Linda's parents would spend thousands of dollars on psychotherapy, but it wouldn't do any good. Big Jeff's family restaurant, 12:17 p.m. Sarah buzzed through the gradually thickening haze, the heated smog shimmering the horizon into a mirage of loudly hued road signs and billboards. She guided her Honda into the parking lot of Big Jeff's. She hastily chained the scooter to a light pole near the plaster and fiberglass icon of Big Jeff himself, wearing a cocked chef's cap and an obscenely jolly grin. The freckled imp was perpetually lifting a sculpted hamburger, mustard drooling down the sesame seed bun, always moments from dropping to the pavement, in homage to whatever deity watches over fat kids. The smell of Big Jeff's wholesome atmosphere roiled up and enveloped her in a sickly sweet miasma of stale cigarette smoke, half-eaten, slime-cold hamburgers, and the special sauce coagulating and turning as dark as molasses. The lunch rush was just welling into full chaos. Busboys hovered over conspicuously, buzzard-like in their patience, clearing tables of culinary debris moments after the perpetrators of the mess departed. Waitresses jogged, customers wolfed, and even the older patrons rushed to restrooms. A video camera assessed the dining room area from over the staff-only door. Sarah grimaced as she passed under it, not seeing and therefore colliding with Nancy Dizon, a robust, dark-skinned waitress who was half Filipino, half Irish. "Sorry," Sarah breathed. Nancy waved her off. "No, my fault. Rushing 'cause I'm late." "Me too," Sarah said to Nancy's rapidly receding back. In the service corridor, Sarah slowed down to forage in her purse for her time card, in the process dropping her books. As she knelt to pick them up, a tinny voice called her name. She looked at the ceiling camera just above a door marked Chuck Breen, manager. Sarah, would you come to the office, please?" Biting her lip, Sarah slipped her card into the time clock and winced at the sound. Accusatory clunk it made as her tardiness was processed and immortalized. Then she heaved the pile of books under her arm and pushed the door open. Chuck Breen was sitting at his desk behind a console lined with monitors. All he needed was a uniform to look the part of a security guard. He wore no badges, except perhaps in his heart. Sarah tried her brightest, bravest smile. "Hi Chuck, guess what? I'm late." She said it as one word, but Chuck picked it apart and figured it out. He leaned into the underglow of a monitor, and the moonscape of his pimple-pocked face went into bas relief. Charming. "This," Chuck indicated the computer on his desk, "is an Apple Macintosh 128K with a multi-plan spreadsheet. It's my organizer. I record wages, tips, work schedules, and, most importantly, the time clock. You're exactly 18 minutes late, Connor." "Excuse?" "I had a flat. Why is it, Connor, that so many people's tires seem unable to hold air when I haven't had a flat in 10 years? "For the last 10 years you've taken the bus?" Sarah answered evenly. "As everyone without reliable transportation should. My bike is usually reliable. I haven't had a flat in..." "Excuse me, Connor. I don't want to hear the history of your moped." "It's a scooter, Chuck," she said. "What are you doing?" the little Sarahs chided. "You need this job." For a moment, Sarah tried to throw off the cautious voices. Then she gave in. "Listen, Chuck, I'm sorry. It won't happen again." Simple, humble, reassuring. With most people, it would have been enough. Not this guy. "Look, Sarah, someday you're going to have to learn that you have basic responsibilities you must fulfill as an adult. Care for yourself, your family, and honor your commitments to others, namely your employer. You must not be late again. Why do people have to act like this? She thought. The urge to tell Chuck how relevant his cosmic view was to her right now rose to a peak. But it was beaten back by the little Sarahs, who counselled job preservation. This was strangling time. It seemed to another part of Sarah that she'd have been able to say something more than she had. But she didn't. And that was a little sad. But it was the decision she made. And Sarah was not about to sit on her hands and yell about the pain. I'm docking you half a unit. He motioned her over and pointed at her name, flashing like a miniature neon in a ghostly electronic limbo. See? It's entered. Chuck was back into the black and white fish bowls, his eyes scanning independently, reminding Sarah of Pugsley as he contemplated a chunk of lettuce. Ain't life grand, she muttered to herself as she went out the door. Outside, Sarah felt herself stiffening with rage. She hurried around the corner, and just outside the dressing room, she whirled around and flipped a bird in the direction of the manager's office. Chuck's voice came over the speaker. Bad attitude, Connor. That's not the kind of thing a Jeff's girl should be doing. Remember, you are a Jeff's girl, at least for the time being. Sarah had forgotten the camera at the other end of the corridor. Don't forget to push the Jeff salad today, okay? Nancy rode down the hall towards her. Come on, she said. Big Jeff is watching you. Inside the dressing room, Sarah tiredly dropped her books on the floor of her locker. I'll bet he has one of those cameras hidden in here somewhere. Oh, yeah? Nancy murmured. She lifted her Jeff skirt and yanked her panties down and mooned the room. This is for you, Crater Face. Sarah laughed, releasing the last remnants of anger, then started to undress. Careful, Nancy warned, smacking her ever-present wad of 5 sticks of gum. Sarah faked paranoia and faced the wall, hiding behind the locker as she got out of her clothes and into the purple and pink blouse and skirt. Nancy dawdled, gold-bricking, waiting for Sarah to finish, using the time for her favourite activity, gossiping about their fellow waitresses. Today she was blathering happily about Sue Ellen, the new trainee with the sloppy habit of sneezing wetly on the food just before serving it. Sarah hurried her makeup, applying a little liner and a touch of blush to bring herself back from the dead. The day was taking its toll, that was for sure. When she was little, her mother used to tell her she had eyes that would one day drive men crazy. She studied them now. The lower lids drooped slightly. Her mother said women would envy that sexy look. But Sarah only thought it made her look as if she'd just got up after a long night. And the colour. Her mother had raved about that too. Mahogany, to match her chestnut hair. Sarah smiled to herself, then tossed her head back and tightened her face, studying the effects a few dabs of mascara made. The usual. Sarah saw only dark brown eyes and light brown hair. Nice try, Mom. A moment later, she stood before the full-length mirror and put her hair into the official Big Jeff's net. Hi, Sarah said, adopting a vacuous smile. My name is Sarah, and I'll be your waitress. She pinched her cheeks for good measure. Peaches and cream. I'm so fucking wholesome. That put Nancy on the floor. Big Jeff's Family Restaurant, 4:34 p.m. Sarah was gamely running the gauntlet of rabid customers, weaving between tables like a road company ballerina, deftly balancing 3 full dinners on her outstretched arms and gripping a Jeff's salad in one hand. A beefy, middle-aged man with a bear's face and a look of indignation reached out and tugged her apron. With practiced aplomb, Sarah shifted the weight to avoid sudden disaster and faced the man, who pointed, in vexation, at his plate of fries. How about a bottle of ketchup, huh? Sarah put on her vacuous grimace and burbled ingenuously. You mean in addition to the one you already have on your table? The man followed her eyes to the bottle of ketchup tucked behind the menu rack. Marching on, she unloaded her culinary cargo at a booth filled with impatient men. As she started sorting out who got what, an old man a few tables away shouted that he wanted his coffee, Now. She tossed a "be right with you" over her shoulder, then faced the immediate problem. "Okay, who gets the burly beef?" One answered, "I ordered barbecue beef." Another cut in, "I think that's mine, but I didn't order fries." Another overlapped, "Mine's the chili cheese deluxe." Sarah was falling behind the whole thing. Her feet had already gone half past pain and agony and were quickly heading into fallen arches. Generally, she could easily handle the job, but this was not one of her better days. More than usual, the personal hauntings and nagging little conflicts were stacking up on her, piling unbidden one atop the other, until she began to lose her concentration. And now, at this moment, the whole world was becoming an agonizingly simple and focused question. Okay then, who gets the burly beef? A fat, blonde woman shepherding two hyperactive girls into the next booth touched Sarah's sleeve insistently. "Miss?" she said, as if Sarah had nothing better to do than hang on her every word. "We're ready to order now." "Yes, ma'am, I'll be right with you. If you'll just..." She was going on autopilot and put the last plate on the table. As she stood up, her arm brushed a water glass and it spun onto the man at the end of the booth, dousing his jacket. He threw up his arms in dismay. Sarah hastily patted his jacket and dabbed unthinkingly at his lap with a napkin, babbling, "I'm sorry, sir. This isn't real leather, is it?" Of course it was, and the guy's expression left no doubt. Meanwhile, one of the little girls in the next booth scooped up some ice cream and maliciously dropped it into Sarah's tip pouch. Sarah suppressed an amazed cry. The little girl chortled in triumph. Sarah fixed the child with a forlorn stare, and the little Sarahs yanked on their reins, barely controlling the exasperation. The man whose jacket Sarah had drenched muttered, "Nice going, kid. I ought to give you the tip." Sarah just stood there, the sense of malevolent forces whirling around her increasing. Nancy passed by her in the aisle and patted her on the shoulder, tilting her head sideways with an impish grin. "Look at it this way, Connor. In 100 years, who's going to care?"